Why does Marvel Strike Force seemingly have more than its share of bugs and errors? Well, I got some friends. I got some family that work in the tech field. No, they do not work for Scopely or Savvy or anything like that. They're just people that work in the tech field. They do programming. They do coding. They do Q&A. They do cybersecurity. And we were just talking about some of the issues in the game, and they actually had a whole lot of good stuff to say. They had a lot of interesting points. So maybe we're going to try here a little multi-part series and just talk about why some of these things happen. And therefore, we can understand what's going on perhaps with Marvel Strike Force, understand the solutions that they may be dealing with, and why some of those solutions might take some time to get things done. In talking with my guys, we kind of came up with this term of the genius paradox, right? They kind of were describing it as, think of it this way. You got a cat who's ultra good. Cat is dope. He's 100% in his field. Great educator, great teacher. He's a genius. He's gonna come up with these concepts, and he attracts the attention of someone else. So they're like, hey man, we want you to come over here and teach our guys. Come over and teach this class. Come over, help us to do this thing. And so this dude is like, yeah man, I'm down with that. I'm gonna come help, right? So they work out the deals, contract, there's money, and the guy's like, yeah man, I'm gonna come over here. I'm gonna help teach. I'm gonna help educate and provide, something for the next generation. So imagine this though. Now, what happens is the guy gets there and the information he's expected to relate is in Spanish. Does he even speak Spanish? And if so, it's difficult if it's not your first language, right? There's always little variations, idiosyncrasies, right? Spanish that people speak in Mexico is different than what they say in Spain. On top of that, let's say our guy here, he's not looking at a traditional textbook, the textbook that he's supposed to be teaching from, right? They're like, no, man, you can't teach from yours. You got to teach from this. The textbook he's supposed to be teaching from is more of an autobiography, right? So he's a chemist and he's going to be teaching his chemistry class, but it's more of an autobiography of this other chemist. And it's talking about his life story and how he came to learn about the different formulas and equations, how he applied them in his life. And that's what helped him to solve these problems. That's cool and all. It's a great read, but it's going to be full of a bunch of more personal information, a bunch of, from that person's viewpoint kind of thing. And that stuff doesn't always translate as smoothly and as easily as one thinks. See, there's cultural context on that, right? All the girls in this picture are Spanish, but what does that mean, right? What does that mean? They look different. They're different ages. They come from different backgrounds, and the way they would communicate to you, their wants and needs concerning dance are going to be different. Simply, even based on their skill level. Gideon, what are we talking about? All that is a factor when it comes into coding in computer languages, right? When I sit down and write something out, not that I'm a coder, that's going to be different than what somebody else might sit down and write out. Just based on their background, based on their education, based on their experience with the coding language and whatnot so far. For example, here's a good illustration. In the English language, if I say the word pop, what does that mean? Right? That can be a term of endearment for someone's father. That can be what happens when you overinflate or puncture a balloon. You could be talking about some soda or another brown adult beverage, right? All those can be true. And in some places right here in the United States, none of those can be true because it depends on where you live. It depends on the region. There's differences with that. And all that can be a factor when it comes to coding, right? All that. I saw an example the other day. One of my guys showed me something that was 47 lines of code, and he showed me something that was 150 lines of code, and they both supposedly did the same thing. So depending on the school of thought you came from, are you more of a short, long, and why, right? The person coming in has to understand and familiarize themselves with that, and that can be difficult. So the better a team is, we're talking about Marvel Strike Force, those guys that laid down the initial code, as good as they are, if they're super good at it, it actually can make it more difficult because you have to understand their thinking at the time. Why did they do it this way and not that way, right? I would have done it differently. So you have to figure out, well, why did they approach it in the way that they did? And if you don't understand that, that can cause problems. That can cause more problems and more hiccups. So you might say, well, kid, just go get those guys. Just go get those original dudes. They'll help, pay them a little money. They'll help figure it out. Well, again, that's easier said than done. That's easier said than done. Just like our kids in the picture there, they got to, right, you talk about the game's 5 years old, and it probably took 2 years to develop the game. So you're talking about 7 years ago. So you're talking about getting a hold of a dude who's moved on in life. They got their own job, right? And you saying, hey, man, after you do your 8 to 10 hours at your regular job, I need you to come over here and do some of this. And you got to, tell me the story that you were telling 7 years ago. How many of us remember? How many of us remember if we, you were hanging out with your buddies 7 years ago around the campfire, somebody told you a good story. How many of us remember the details to that story? Man, that's hard to do. And it's the same thing in the coding world. That was a long time ago. That don't mean that they were in the same frame of mind. They've grown and evolved since then. They might look at the material and be like, man, like, I don't even know what I was thinking at the time, right? Because I haven't touched it. And it's expensive to do. I know a cat right now who is technically retired from the company. He doesn't work there anymore, but they still give him a paycheck because he put down the original code and he had to sign a document. That's the only reason why they let him retire. Crazy. I don't understand how the corporate world works, but they wouldn't let him retire unless he signed a document saying they had to have unrestricted access to him for 2 years. Right? I live up in the Midwest where it's cold, but they're paying this dude who's not even working for them to have access to the dude for 2 years. They still paying him a salary before he moves down south and gets out there and gets on the links, man. So it's a little bit more difficult than we might think. So I'm sure they're working on it. I'm sure Scopely's working on it. Right? Say, well, they could just rewrite it. Again, it took 2 years to develop Strikeforce to get it to release. So that stuff takes time. It takes money. You got to pay people to do that. So just a little bit of understanding, not excusing anything, but just a little bit of understanding of what's going on and what goes into trying to fix bugs and whatnot. We got more. If you're interested, let me know. We got more. I probably got enough for 3 or 4 parts. But hey, let me know if this is something that interests you. Take it easy. Enjoy the rest of your day. Peace.